world is shocked by Elvis Presley's sudden death after attempts to save his life failed. The apparent cause, according to his personal physician, Dr. George Nicopolis, is a heart attack.
I just can't believe he's dead. It's terrible. But I just thank God that Elvis died here at Graceland instead of on the road just like any other rock and roll singer.
Pandemonium has broken out here on Elvis Presley Boulevard in Memphis. Thousands of fans from all over the country are converging on Graceland, trying to get in to view the body of the 42-year-old king of rock and roll.
When I was 10 years old, my mother and daddy loved him. And I just say I was raised on him. There's nobody else like him. There won't ever be anybody else like him as far as I'm concerned.
6 days before his death, Elvis Presley sat down to write what might be the most haunting account of his life. Raw, unflattering, and heartbreaking. The letter, hidden for nearly 5 decades, exposes manipulation, betrayal, and his crippling sense of isolation. The king of rock and roll, adored by millions, felt like a prisoner in his own fame. And now, the man who electrified the world has one final story to tell, a story you won't believe until you hear it. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now, back to the video. They found it in Tupelo, Mississippi, Elvis Presley's birthplace, at an unremarkable private estate sale. The letter, written in the king's unmistakable scrawl, had been tucked away for nearly half a century. Its existence wasn't public knowledge. It wasn't meant to be, but the timing of its emergence feels almost deliberate, arriving like a ghost from the past to remind the world of the man behind the myth. Elvis had been gone for more than 40 years before these words saw the light of day. Now they're forcing fans, historians, and even his closest confidants to confront a reality far different from the one he projected. To understand why this letter matters, you first have to set aside every image you have of Elvis. Forget the dazzling rhinestone jumpsuits, the sold-out arenas, the effortless charisma that made millions swoon. The letter reveals another Elvis, a man who had reached the end of his tether. Fame wasn't a dream come true. It had become a waking nightmare. What's most haunting is the brutal clarity with which he wrote about it. I feel like a piece of meat being devoured by strangers. One line states. In another, he refers to himself as nothing more than a product shaped and packaged for the masses, while his own humanity was stripped away. This was not a message of gratitude or a reflection on his successes as the king of rock and roll. It was a desperate cry for freedom, penned by someone who felt trapped inside his own life. And the culprits, according to Elvis, weren't just the industry or the pressures of fame. They were the very people he had trusted most. The letter points fingers, naming names and groups in painstaking detail. The Memphis Mafia, he wrote, pretended to be family but looked out for themselves. My pain was their paycheck. It's not hard to imagine the sting of betrayal that fueled those words. Those closest to Elvis were supposed to protect him from the predators of the entertainment industry. Instead, they became enablers. In the letter, he accuses them of creating an environment where his health and well-being were secondary to cashing in on his success. Take the example of his dependence on prescription drugs, a habit that spiraled out of control in his later years. The same entourage that procured them for him was also reaping the benefits of his continued performances. Despite his declining physical and mental state, he likened his own world to a cage, writing, "The locks are made of greed, and everyone around me is holding the key." What makes this letter more unsettling is the specificity. It wasn't filled with vague laments about fame. It was a personal account of manipulation, featuring individuals who were actively profiting while Elvis was sinking. The rawness of his words cuts through the glamour that people associate with his life. It's hard to reconcile the image of Elvis serenading a screaming crowd with a man who, in private, was writing, "I don't even recognize myself anymore. I gave them everything and they left me empty." The timing of the letter's discovery has also drawn questions. Why now? Some believe it's no coincidence. With renewed interest in Elvis's life following recent biopics and documentaries, the letter provides an unvarnished perspective that challenges the narratives we've grown comfortable with. For almost 50 years, people have immortalized him as a flawless icon, the king who could do no wrong. But here was his own voice reminding us that the crown came with a crushing price tag. It's impossible to read his words without wondering how things might have turned out if someone had listened. Elvis's letter wasn't just a reflection of his personal struggles, it was a warning. He was telling the world that fame isn't always a gift. Sometimes it's a gilded prison, and for Elvis, the escape route never appeared. This small document, once hidden away, is forcing fans to view his legacy through a different lens. It's a reminder that his story, as monumental as it is, was more complicated than anyone realized. His life wasn't just a tale of incredible talent and achievement. It was also a cautionary tale about how the machine of fame can chew someone up and spit them out. But the letter does more than shed light on his personal struggles. It raises questions about the circumstances of his death. Like any great piece of history, this letter leaves us with as many questions as answers. What pushed Elvis to write it in the first place? Did he hope someone might read it one day and understand him better, or was it just something he needed to get off his chest? And considering everything he revealed, what else might we be missing about the final chapter of his life? Because as eye-opening as his words are, they're only one piece of a much larger and perhaps darker story. We're still left wondering just how much of the truth remains buried. In the final weeks of his life, Elvis Presley seemed like a shadow of his former self. The man once recognized for his boundless energy and electric stage presence had retreated into isolation at his Graceland mansion. His health was visibly deteriorating. Reports from those closest to him paint a grim picture: uncontrolled weight gain, erratic behavior, and an increasing dependency on prescription drugs. By 1977, the vibrant performer who had once electrified millions now spent much of his time confined to his bedroom, avoiding the outside world as his inner circle catered to, and perhaps enabled, his every need. Elvis required nearly constant medical care, although it's unclear how much he genuinely sought help versus how much he leaned on medications to cope. One chilling detail from close observers was that, for periods during those later years, Elvis even neglected basic self-care. At one point, he reportedly refused to bathe consistently, which led to severe sores developing on his body. It was as though his physical decline mirrored the mental and emotional toll fame had taken on him for decades. To the outside world, though, the king of rock and roll was far removed from such vulnerability, and that's exactly how he wanted it to be, a mystery hidden behind the gates of Graceland. Yet all of this backdrop makes the events of August 16th, 1977 even more unsettling. The official cause of death was heart failure, but that explanation has never sat comfortably with a segment of his fans or even some experts. For one, the autopsy report was sealed by Elvis's family for 50 years, a decision that created more questions than answers. Why seal it? What might the details reveal that wasn't already public knowledge? And then there's the chaotic scene at Graceland itself, discrepancies in the timeline, delayed toxicology reports. It didn't take long for the speculation to snowball. One of the most persistent theories suggests that Elvis's death wasn't due to natural causes, but rather an overdose. This wasn't baseless conjecture. Closer examination revealed that, in the 7 months leading up to his death, Elvis had been prescribed nearly 9,000 pills, injections, and vials of various medications. The pills weren't just for physical ailments. Anxiety, insomnia, and other struggles were also driving forces behind the cocktail of drugs he consumed daily. His reliance on such substances had been an open secret, one that some believe his inner circle intentionally ignored. This isn't where the finger-pointing ends. The Memphis Mafia, a nickname for Elvis's closest friends and entourage, came under scrutiny after his death. They were more than just his confidants. They controlled access to him, handled his schedule, and arguably contributed to an environment where his dependency spiraled unchecked. If they truly cared for him, why didn't they intervene? Or could they have been too entrenched in the lifestyle Elvis provided them to risk speaking out? In his final letter, Elvis himself seemed to accuse them of betrayal, writing, "My pain was their paycheck." And then there's the controversial, though lesser-known theory of the Valsalva's maneuver. Some medical experts believe his chronic constipation, exacerbated by both his health problems and prescription medications, might have played a role in triggering a fatal cardiac event. A post-mortem report suggested that compacted stool, estimated to be 4 months old, was found in his bowel. It's an unglamorous and tragic image, but one that underscores how complicated his health decline truly was. This theory suggests that the act of straining in the bathroom could have put fatal pressure on his cardiovascular system, leading to cardiac arrest. It's the kind of detail that humanizes Elvis in the saddest of ways. His death, no matter how extravagant his life seemed, boiled down to something many people fear: neglect of health and loneliness. Even more heartbreaking was the discovery of his body. Ginger Alden, Elvis's girlfriend at the time, found him lying face down on the bathroom floor at Graceland. Her description has remained seared in public memory. His arms lay on the ground, close to his sides, palms facing upward, she said. It was clear that from the moment he landed on the floor, Elvis hadn't moved. The scene was tragically still, an eerie silence where millions had once heard screams and applause. That letter of his, written just days beforehand, casts all of this in a sharper light. While hindsight might tempt us to ask if someone could have prevented the worst, the reality is far messier. His words reveal layers of betrayal and manipulation by those tasked with protecting him, showing just how little control Elvis felt he had in his final years. "The locks are made of greed," he wrote. "It's hard not to wonder if those same locks contributed to his death." What we're left with is an incomplete puzzle. The official narrative about Elvis's death has always been tidily constructed. Heart failure and tragedy, nothing more. But his own words suggest there's far more beneath the surface. The real story of Elvis Presley in those final days challenges everything. What we thought we knew about him, the circumstances of his death, and who, if anyone, he could really trust. And if the letter is this revealing, it's worth asking, what else is still hidden behind the myth of the king? Elvis's final letter isn't just a window into his struggles, it's a reckoning with the myth we've built around him. For decades, we celebrated the king of rock and roll, but these words force us to see the man who was consumed by fame. They didn't kill Elvis all at once. They did it slowly, and they did it while we watched. It's a reality too stark to ignore. If this letter grants Elvis the voice he was denied, we're left with a question. What would he think of the legacy we've preserved? And at what cost do we crown our icons?